Well, John, it's great to have a second conversation with you. Last week, we were talking about change, and you had all kinds of excellent stuff on kind of the spiritual side of change. And I wanted to just dig a little bit deeper on the idea of change and ask, do you have a personal philosophy of change?
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. I'm glad to be on again. And my personal philosophy on change is something I learned over, I guess, my entire life, and certainly a business and church work, is that change typically is a word that causes all sorts of negative emotions with folks. And we look at change as a negative, as a takeaway. My life is in this box, and I know how it operates, and anything outside of that box is a threat to it. And certainly if you come and say we have to change, that means maybe my box is going to be a little different size, a little different shape, maybe a different color. I look at change as renewal. And if you look at how God has worked through creation, if you look at God has worked through our lives, when we learn the most is when we are forced to change, or forced to do something different. And now I've gotten to the point in my life, Stuart, I look forward to change. It's almost like not I'm a change junkie, but when I see change for positive outcomes and changes to improve things, that just really motivates me. And so my fear of change, maybe in my 20s and 30s, has given way to, I think, God speaking through me and saying, hey, John, here's change for positive outcomes in how to make things better and different in the way the world is going, in the world you're living in now. Use this as an opportunity to do something better and different. So it's been an evolution in my career and my life.
I like that, and it's actually an image I've used as well too of creation, because you look at the seasons. God made things to change. You look in the mirror. God made things to change. It's built into the system. It's how God created it. So you can either rail against the way God created it or say, no, God created everything to change. So, yeah, good stuff. So, John, I specifically wanted to ask, I know you and the Synod Council have been spending time in the book Switch, that's been real helpful in helping on that Synod level to think about change. And I just wonder, obviously you can't summarize the entire book for us real easily, but can you highlight just a couple of things from the book Switch that have been really helpful for you and the Synod Council?
Yes, the book has been extremely helpful, and it's basically on how to lead change. And it's very simple, the concept that the authors Heath and Heath use. And it's a concept of a rider and an elephant, and then creating the path for the elephant. So the rider is the intellect, our intellect. I can appeal to you around why we need to go to the next room and get a drink of water, or go to the next room and have lunch. But the elephant is the emotional portion of our being. And I tell you what, if the intellect wants to go to the next room and the elephant doesn't want to go because it's not hungry, you're not going anywhere. So the whole concept, or the aha for me, was making sure that as leaders that we appeal to both the intellect and to the emotion. And a lot of the examples they use is around creating a path for the elephant, and moving in that path and making that a compelling path and understanding why we're going to where we're going. And we found this, the whole Synod Council's read it, and we're using it as part of our framework, or maybe our new language around how we lead change. So it's been very helpful.
Excellent. Great. Was there anything else from the book that you thought was really worth highlighting in terms of leading change?
Well, they do use a lot of examples that, I think just really highlight this point that most of us think, again, that the intellect drives the change. If I could only appeal to your intellect, you would do something. And really, it's overarching. It's the emotional portion. And I guess the one takeaway I would say out of that, it has changed my behavior, is if you look at Jesus' ministry and how he taught. He taught in parables. He taught in stories. He taught in stories because they appeal to our emotion. And I've actually changed my behavior now. So when I talk about, things that maybe we have to change, I tell stories and try to tell compelling stories of how maybe someone, a pioneer, has taken a step forward. And here's what the positive things that have come out of that. And I find that people resonate more with stories, and it's almost like that's why Jesus did the parables. Because we can still talk about parables, the parable of the prodigal son the other day. Those sorts of things stick in our heads more than a spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers on it.
Very helpful. Excellent. So, John, there was another topic that I wanted to dive into that I think would be really helpful just for as people think about change, but also for us, especially in the Delaware-Maryland Synod. I know that you've been hard at work, and a whole team have been in terms of the Synod staff restructuring process. And I know that'll be unveiled and revealed in a little while. And so I don't want to ask you about the details of that as much as the process by which the Synod has been looking at that change. And the reason I was really thinking and praying on this is our congregations all need to change. There's always things that we need to work on. And how the Synod has been going about this, I think, would be like a little bit of a roadmap and helpful to congregations as we look at what we need to change as well.
Right. So let me try and summarize that as briefly as I can here and give people an idea of what's going on. Out of the Vision 2018, one of the items under leadership was to actually look at the structure of how our Synod is organized, all the way from staffing and programs and deans and conferences and even where we're located physically with the office. And this was approved at last Synod Assembly almost unanimously. I think that maybe there's one dissenting vote out of the 500 or 600, but full support for moving forward. So we got a team led by Ron Fairchild, who's one of our very talented lay leaders out of Grace in Westminster, and he's doing a great job with our team. Bishop Gold is on this with us, and you know a really good team that's got a good perspective. And what we're trying to do is look at each of those areas around how we're organized, and probably the biggest one is around staffing. We cannot support the paid staff we've had in the past. Okay, so out of that, either you can say, well, why don't we just try and find some other money or whatever, versus let's try and do something different. Okay, and sometimes I think God calls us or provides situations that we are forced to change. Okay, and I think this is one of these things. The ministry mission support has dropped. I mean, I'll be open and honest about that over the years, and we just can't afford what we've been affording before. The positive out of all this is I think we've talked about raising up lay leaders. We've talked about empowering others, rostered leaders and other ministers in the Synod to do more of what has been done by paid staff from the Synod. So how do we push that down to help other people raise up and use their gifts and talents versus deferring some things to a paid staff? So, you know, here we have less money than we had before. We can't continue to pay as many staff. So now all of a sudden we've got a situation where we're trying to do more with less, and then get people that maybe have been active in our Synod to raise up and step up and into leadership roles that maybe they weren't even aware were out there, and they can grow in their faith and grow in their service too. So we'll be hearing more about this. We're starting to roll this out to the conferences and in town meeting style, and it'll be presented at the Synod Assembly in the spring here and voted upon. So
I mean, I'm often just like kind of pulling pieces apart and just kind of getting the learnings. So one of them I hear is finding people with the right gifts.
Yes.
Ron, does this professionally. So, team-based, don't go away in a corner and just kind of, decide it yourself, but take a team and use the gifts that they have. Another thing that I hear in what you're saying is reality. Face what is actually happening. And I think for a lot of leaders and congregations, that's a key step of just, here's what the reality of our situation is. How are we going to move from that? Another learning that I gathered from what you just said was looking for the positive side of it, but also how that can involve new people that have not previously been. Yeah. And that's true in a lot of congregations where maybe they have to cut staffing in their congregation, but it could be an opportunity for somebody to be involved in a volunteer capacity that they were not before.
Right. And through all that, too, I think that's where we grow in our faith, if we're asked to do things that help the kingdom and help us move forward, right, and help the mission of the church and spread the gospel, that we become better disciples, okay, and our faith grows. So there's this benefit of, certainly the overarching church is benefited, but we're also benefited internally by faith growth through these things. But it's been a very good experience. And again, the teams come up with some ideas. The other concept we're trying to do is test this idea with as many people as we can before we get to the Synod Assembly.
Okay.
Get feedback. What do you think? How can we get this thing crafted such that it makes sense for the majority of us, and as we move forward, that we have full support of what we're trying to do. And again, this is not because quote, we're in trouble financially. This is because we need to modernize to do church differently, not just at the individual congregation level, but at the synod level. Our synod needs to adapt. And to me, this is a natural part of that adaptation process when we become better at spreading the gospel, which is, the bottom line of what we're trying to do here. And how do we help each of our individual congregations do that better?
Well, certainly that's true for individual congregations too, to adapt,
Absolutely.
To the world we live in and to live into that and, do our best with that facing that. Yeah. Anything else that you would want to share out of that would be a learning that leaders would need from leading change?
What I would just say is, as people start to hear some of these things coming out, is take the time to look at the details and understand and ask the questions. There's nothing that we've got a lock on the right answer here, but I do believe the Holy Spirit's heavily at work here. I've just seen so many things happen in such a short period of time that I think we're onto something here, and want to make sure that we have everybody's input before we move forward. But I think we're going to be in a much better place a year from now, and a year from that later will be even better. So, and I guess in closing, just don't be afraid of change. I know that all of us.
Well, it's the elephant.
The elephant, right? The elephant,
yeah.
Right? And just use maybe my personal story about how I've seen change be something that allows me to learn and grow in my faith, and learn and grow in how good a leader I am each and every day. So again, Stuart, thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Thanks so much for your time, John.